Hey everyone. Hello. So let's start with our first ever demo day. Okay. So yeah, let's start discovering Reach Security MSSP program. Thank you to everybody joining today. So we know how critical it is to stay ahead in the ever-evolving cybersecurity landscape as an MSSP. So I think this is a good opportunity to elevate your service offerings with RidgeBot. So for those who don't know RidgeBot yet, today we'll be explaining our tool that is an AI-powered security validation platform. Okay. And first thing, let me introduce myself. I'm Monse, marketing manager at Reach Security. And yeah, so what to expect from this session. So first, we'll have a presentation of our Reach Security MSSP program. Then we'll have a live demo of Reach Security of RidgeBot in action. And then we'll present some real-world use cases for you to understand better how we work together. And at the end, we'll leave the questions, okay? So we have a Q&A section for you, and our sales experts will address them at the end. Okay, now let me introduce our expert team today. First, we have Brian, that is our regional sales director. We have Dennis, that is our regional sales director at Reach Security as well. And we have Kevin, that is our regional director of sales engineering. And with that, let's get started. So, hope this session is very valuable for you.
Thanks, Monse. Appreciate the introduction. I'm Brian Nyber. I'm the Western Region Sales Director here at Ridge Security. I'll have Dennis and Kevin introduce themselves here in just a moment, but we're very excited for our first ever MSSP Demo Day presentation. Our goal for the presentation today is to share some of the more common use cases we see our MSP and MSSP partners leveraging RidgeBot to be able to deepen their relationships with their clients, augment existing service offerings, and potentially open up additional service offerings to their clients, especially those that are on the CTEM journey and looking for new and more frequent insights into their security posture. I think RidgeBot does a fantastic job of supplementing what MSSPs offer to obtain a different level of efficiency and a deeper experience with their clients in terms of the frequency of the insights that we can deliver. But without further ado, I'll have Dennis and Kevin introduce themselves, then we'll dive into the presentation. And please, for all of the attendees, leverage that Q&A function along the way. We would love to keep this as conversational as possible and bring in some questions from the audience as we go through.
Yeah, thanks, Brian, and thanks everyone for joining us today. As Brian mentioned, I am Dennis Cassidy, a regional sales director here at Ridge Security, located in Boston, and I oversee the Eastern region for Ridge Security. My background, I've been at cybersecurity startups for over 10 years now, more notably at companies like Cobalt, focused on penetration testing, and Veracode, focused on application security. So really excited to get going here and show you folks the program.
Hi team, Kevin Sisney. I've been with Ridge about 6 months. Before that, I spent about 18 years as a practitioner. Got my start in cyber or IT security writing group policy. I've built out multiple vulnerability and risk management programs across the domains of manufacturing, aircraft, DoD contracting, as well as fintech. I'm really looking forward to showing you the tool and how we can help you leverage this in your environment and for your clients.
Thanks, guys. Go ahead and dive into our presentation here. So again, our goal for today is to introduce Ridge Security, our RidgeBot platform, and talk a little bit about our MSSP program and how we're working with a variety of providers really all over the globe who are leveraging RidgeBot to deliver a variety of services and insights to their clients along the way. Again, as a baseline introduction, RidgeBot is an automated penetration testing platform powered by machine learning and AI in the background to be able to help clients identify not just vulnerabilities in their networks, web applications, and APIs, but more importantly, show you which of those vulnerabilities are actually exploitable by threat actors. RidgeBot allows clients to do a variety of testing at scales that are typically difficult for human-led penetration testers, but I will emphasize that I don't really think of RidgeBot as a replacement for human penetration testers. I think of us as a fantastic tool to augment and supplement what human penetration testers are doing, and to be able to deliver more frequent insights and in concert with the notion of CTEM and that CTEM journey. So being able to not just rely on a single point in time, but be able to do multiple assessments across their infrastructure and their environment on a very regular basis. So a couple of things that we're going to be talking about in the presentation today is how we see our clients deepening their relationships with their clients and driving new service offerings, whether those are continuous security testing, augmenting their existing manual penetration testing, a variety of attack surface management offerings and vCISO offerings, and then vulnerability management and helping prioritize those vulnerabilities that are coming out of a RidgeBot assessment that have that kill chain analysis and that validation of exploitability, so you can help your clients better understand where the best bang for their buck is. We obviously live in a world where time and resources are always constrained, so being able to focus on those vulnerabilities that are truly exploitable and likely lead to the bad thing happening is a really important piece of the equation. So those are a couple of things that we're going to be talking about, but I would love to, again, encourage the attendees to use the Q&A if there's things that they want to dive into in more detail over the course of the presentation. Our MSSP program here at Ridge Security is really built with ease and flexibility in mind. We have a number of different licensing models available for the platform. They can help drive new service offerings and augment those existing service offerings that MSSPs and MSPs currently have with their clients. And again, it's built around the notion of whether you're looking for ad hoc services or being able to move clients to more of a continuous assessment mindset and approach. We can definitely help with both of those delivery models. RidgeBot at the end of the day, I think, is a great fit for not only small businesses, but all the way up to the enterprise clientele as well. Because of the automated nature of the testing that we can do, we can think about testing in a different mindset in terms of the scale that we can approach. And we're always eager to do co-branded and joint marketing opportunities with our MSSP and MSP partners to be able to make this really a mutually beneficial relationship along the way. So the first use case that I want to talk a little bit about is the attack surface management. We all know that an accurate inventory of the assets that a client has out in the world is so fundamental from a cybersecurity hygiene perspective. We think of attack surface identification as one of the most important foundational pieces from a cybersecurity perspective, and it's why we have a very, very robust attack surface scanning platform built into the RidgeBot tool to help clients understand what assets they have out in the world. This also doesn't take any of the licensing within the RidgeBot platform. I think it's a very, very user-friendly piece of functionality in terms of being able to get your foot in the door and help clients understand what assets they have out in the world and what they need to protect. Kevin, can I bring you in at this point and have you talk a little bit about some of our attack surface scanning and maybe bring up RidgeBot and talk about the way we typically outline our POC experiences with clients and how we get them into the RidgeBot platform to begin their scanning and their testing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Team, this is really your first scan, and I'm going to start sharing as I'm talking. The interesting thing about this particular scenario is it doesn't count against any licensing. So we could help you get through the door with the MSSV licensing by putting one IP on a RidgeBot deployment and doing that attack surface scan. So very easy to get set up, and I'll walk us through setting up an attack surface scan. Let me go back and start over. I'm in my task section. I'm going to create a new task. I'm going to select my attack surface identification pen test or scenario, excuse me. My task name becomes my report names in the future, so I need to be descriptive. And I'm going to put in my subnet that I'm checking as well. I can put in singular or a list of IPs, or I can do CIDR notation. also bring in from a CSV file. So I'm going to look at this /24. I can schedule that to run, or I can run it now, schedule it to run once, or set it up on a weekly or a monthly cadence if I want to, see that attack surface evolve over time. I can turn my noise level down. I'm going to set this to stealthy. I want RidgeBot to take its time and be able to crawl through the environment, do that discovery, find those open ports, any services running. I can also connect RidgeBot to ServiceNow, Jira, or GitLab for ticketing or cases. We can also set it up to do email notification, Ceph and Leaf, Syslog, and also Slack. So I'm going to leave everything alone since this is just an attack surface. I just want to see what's living on this /24. And within a couple of minutes and about 5 mouse clicks, I'm performing an attack surface scan on a /24 in my client's environment. So as I let that cook, let's look at one that we've already done. Same subnet, everything. I can see very quickly, I'm going to get 100 health score because I'm not looking for any vulnerabilities, any exploits. I am looking for live targets on my /24. I've found 54 live targets. More importantly, I have found 36,000 attack surfaces on these 56 nodes or live targets. I haven't even done any vulnerability scanning. So I can look at this. I can go to my attack surface. I've got 375 open ports. I'm going to link them to a service and an application if I can. But I have 35,000 URLs hanging off my targets in my environment. Do I know what all of these are? Does anybody in my client's IT or infrastructure have any clue why there's 35,000 URLs hanging off? These are wiki pages, so that actually makes kind of sense, but you get my point. So very quickly, we can get to see what exactly is going on in the environment. I can look at the node detail. I get that this is Ubuntu. This particular one has 198 attack surfaces. And I haven't even looked for vulnerabilities or exploits yet. So first scan in any new environment can also be leveraged as a way in the door to show them what's going on in their environment, any shadow or any gray IT. Any questions on that?
Kevin, I've always loved the power of this scan just as an initial foot in the door. If you think back to your, 20, 30 years as a practitioner and with an IT director hat on, this in and of itself seems like a very difficult amount of data to aggregate and just understand what's out there. And with the world of cloud products and the push towards that, it seems like the challenge is even compounded from there.
It is. And so Dennis and Brian know this story. If you've talked to me and have gotten me off on a tangent on network printers, this is a story they've heard. In my fintech days, I brought in a higher end vulnerability tool and started doing discovery scans and trying to find things on the network. Across 7 states, in 17 locations with no more than 50, 60 people, I found over 100 network printers that had default credentials, hadn't been updated, and I don't even know how long. Nobody could answer me where these printers came from. And that's literally just a discovery scan, not even as deep as this attack surface scan. So as you guys get to know me, you'll hear me curse printers and scoring probably more than anything. So those are my 2 bugaboos, I guess. But anyway, very powerful, doesn't count against licensing. And again, we'll show you that full attack surface of what you were able to discover. And I even break it out by targets, and then I can even report on it as well.
That's great. And Kevin, can you talk a little bit as our audience here is thinking about how they potentially leverage this solution for their clientele? Can you talk a little bit about how RidgeBot is deployed, and if you were in that seat, how you would think about getting
Absolutely.
access to client infrastructure, networks,
Yeah.
get into their systems and be able to do this type of attack surface
Yeah.
mapping and discovery?
So RidgeBot is a self-contained pen testing appliance. It's not a SaaS product. You can install it on bare metal. Um, I have it running on an Intel type NUC on my fireplace mantle. So as long as it has the hardware requirements, you can ship it to a client site, put the one IP license on it, and log into it and do these scans. We also have an open VPN connection to where if you put an open VPN endpoint in your clients, we can connect the RidgeBot to that as well. Other than that, we can put it in the local VMware infrastructure, being Hyper-V VMware, KVM, Proxmox, and then also public clouds of Azure, AWS, and GCP with pre-built deployable AMIs in the Azure and AWS marketplace. We do have install files for the GCP. It's just not an AMI in their marketplace as of today.
Thanks, Kevin. That's helpful. And I think as I think about this attack surface scanning, I think there's a number of different service offerings that really go hand in glove with this. I think this plays a really important piece in a vCISO offering. I think this can be a standalone service offering. And I think one of the powerful components within RidgeBot is the ability to be able to schedule scans and schedule testing. Talk to me a little bit about how you would envision running multiple attack surface scans on a recurring basis and being able to call out those differences, because I think one of the common challenges is, are all the assets online? What are the differences between the two?
Right.
What did we see
Right.
last month that we didn't see last month, and is it something that belongs on the network?
Absolutely. As you can see, I have an attack surface scheduled weekly. So I get the standard attack surface report, but I can also do a historical report over time, and I can compare that data, or I can do a scan one versus scan two differential report. Maybe I'm looking at first of quarter, end of quarter, and see where my attack surface has changed, or first of month, end of month. Again, you see where I'm going with this. So very easy to get in here on scheduled scan and watch that attack surface evolve and make sure that we have cleaned up the attack surface if need be, reduce the amount of URLs and open ports in the environment, or what have you. It's very easy to tailor that to the end client's needs. And I ran an attack surface report. It's still cooking. I'll see if I can show you that later in the webinar. And Brian, I'll hand it back over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think one of the use cases that a lot of our clients and prospects ask us about that I think attack surface management plays an interesting piece in is also mergers and acquisitions. We've all read more horror stories than we care to count about a merger and acquisition being the vector for a breach when they bring an acquisition in. They don't have a good understanding of what's on that particular network or the assets associated with that acquisition. Being able to scan and understand the skeletons that might be in the closet before bringing them in and completing the acquisition and merging those networks together. So I think it plays an interesting piece in that equation as well.
Absolutely. I was actually on a mergers and acquisition team for the company that owned Cessna and Beechcraft. And this would have been immensely helpful during those visits.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think we'll maybe move the conversation along a little bit here and talk about another one of the use cases in the RidgeBot platform, which is network penetration testing. And we've got a variety of flavors available in the platform here, but this is obviously one of the more tried and true services that we see our MSP and MSSP clients leveraging RidgeBot for. Kevin, do you mind talking a little bit and sharing a little bit of a presentation about how you think about configuring network penetration test?
Absolutely. Let me jump back over to RidgeBot. So again, in our scenarios, we've got a wide range. I didn't touch on these, but we've got specific scenarios. These all come out of the box with RidgeBot. So I can focus on API. I can look at website. I can look at specifically at host. I can look at different intranet things and a default crawler. I can do Windows authenticated pen testing and also black and gray box website pen testing. And I'll show you that in the future. I can look specifically for ransomware if I want to, and the APTs, their tactics, the types of exploits they use, their targeted CWEs, CVEs. So I can even get very specific. So I am actually going to do a ransomware pen test, which is a version of the host pen test. So I'll choose my ransomware penetration test. Again, I need to give it a good name. I'll put in my target. Again, I can import those targets from a list. I can do CIDR notation if I'm licensed for it. I'm going to look at this specific target. I'm going to go ahead and run it now, and I'm going to turn the noise level down. I don't need to connect to ServiceNow, Jira, GitLab. I'll look at my information recon. I can turn on light scan mode if I want to bypass any firewall checks, or I can leave that on to see what alerts I get, or if any. I can change my scan type, look at my recon strategy. I can do customized ports or all ports if I'm looking at certain things. On my exploitation, here's where my guardrails kind of start to kick in. So I can turn my risk control down if I've got a server or an application website that is maybe a little more finicky, or maybe it's the height of the business day and it's processing tons of things. I can turn my risk down. I can also turn my auto exploitation off, which makes RidgeBot a very effective known exploitable and exploitable vulnerability scanner. That's hard to say twice, by the way. On my post exploitation, I can look at lateral movement, number of exploited hosts, the depth that I can go. I can also turn on vertical and horizontal escalation. With horizontal escalation, if I've got a successful exploit, I can have RidgeBot upload a script, run that script, possibly induce some human interaction on the affected target. So I can go a little deeper on my host pen testing and ransomware. So if I leave it kind of as is, again, about a minute to kick that off and about 5 mouse clicks to get that going. Let me see if I've got both. Thought I had a ransomware. There we go. So this is a completed ransomware pen test. I can see on my topology, this is probably hosting websites, or I hope it's supposed to be. I can look at the kill chain and crawl down through. I found README page information, Redis weak password, SSH weak password. So I can real quickly find out what's going on with this particular asset. Large job count. So RidgeBot through 23,000, almost 24,000 jobs at this particular target. I've got a score of 19. My attack surface is 839. Of the 549 vulnerabilities, RidgeBot was able to exploit 4 of them. If I look at my attack surface, I've only got 5 open ports, but I've got 831 URLs hanging off of this particular target. Go to my vulnerability table. I get my business risk at the top, but I still get my remediation and mitigation advice for everything that Ridge finds. And then if I go to my risk table, I can look through here. That's not good. I've got the admin and the guest password on this. So we were able through this to get 2 different passwords, a guest password and an admin password. And then with remote code execution, we will present a snapshot of the actual CLI commands. With this being a Linux host, it would be a whoami ls-l or an if config. With Windows, probably a whoami, a directory listing, and IP config. And we'll post that screenshot there. So very quickly, I can see that I have a problem with this, and this is internal to my network. Any questions on that?
Kevin, one of the things I was thinking about as you're reviewing and showing that dashboard of the jobs that were launched, the vulnerabilities that were identified, the business risks that were called out. If I'm thinking about this through the lens of an MSP or an MSSP who's providing services to their clients, it really seems like that dashboard could be a great way to do a post-engagement debrief and call out the things that are most topical and maybe need to be addressed first and foremost.
Yep, absolutely. You could definitely talk through this, go through the active sites, the attack surface, give them a full look at the vulnerabilities, not necessarily scrolling through it, and then focus on what was found per scan or per target. This is a lot of good information because you drop this bad boy down and show them that their admin password is exposed. That's going to make some jaws drop.
Without a doubt. And can you actually, to that point, can you talk a little bit about the libraries and the dictionaries that are in the RidgeBot platform from a password perspective, and what clients can do to also update those themselves?
Yes, absolutely. In our assets, we have our dictionaries. And these dictionaries get used throughout all of the testing, whether it's host or web testing, things to that nature. So I can start to either populate these dictionaries or use the defaults. But let's say I'm testing one of my clients' website and I want to provide a gray box test. I can go in here and put my username in here, whatever I need to do. I can put as many credentials, whether they're standard or admin credentials. And this is one way that we are able to affect gray box testing across applications and also assets and websites. We've got Apache, Oracle, Joomla, Nexus, and then we start with the passwords. I'm sure most of your clients have either MySQL or MS SQL, probably maybe PostSQL in their environments. And then we've got web login, password that we can put in, and then also several API-driven data or dictionaries for login information, any object or path information that you want to glean from API testing as well. So this is one way that we can do gray web box testing. The other way on host would be, as of today, it's only for Windows, but we can do Windows gray box testing as well. I think I saw that in the Q&A, Brian, so that's why I was bringing that up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt you there, but yes, there were a few questions, but I believe we can get to those probably before the end of the presentation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Reporting, basically, if I'm hitting a subnet or a group of assets and I've got it scheduled, I can do my historical or differential reporting, but very quickly, I can do my standard or custom reporting, generate that, go to my report section, and once that's done, download it. I do highly recommend that when you download reports from RidgeBot that you encrypt them. This is kind of keys to the castle kind of stuff, and you don't want that getting caught in the open. If I go look at, and I'm going to have to redo this, I'll make it a little bigger. I know that's a little tough to see. So here's where my task name became my report name. So we've got to be cognizant of that. Date and time stamp of the actual pen test. Here's where your co-logo would go if need be. And then we're going to get through kind of an overview. I can do an executive summary report and not give all of the full detailed information. That will stop at the bottom of this page. So I'm going to list out the risk, but I'm not going to give any kill chain analysis or any type of remediation mitigation advice. So if you're trying to say, get in the door, get somebody, you give them this executive report that gives them just enough information to be concerned and possibly get you to bring in another SKU and do a full pen test. But very quickly, I can see what's going on in the environment. I've got a number of attack surfaces. My score's in the 20 out of 100. That's probably not good. And I've got 8 successful exploits. I get that business risk summary, configuration at a glance of the test, any fingerprinting or details about the target or assets, and then into my kill chain analysis and my remediation and mitigation advice. So if you could give that executive report up above and not give away everything with it, you can highlight the risk without showing all of your cards, is I guess my way to put that, Brian. So if you've got a better way to put it, call it out.
Nope, I love that. And one of the things I was also thinking about that I want to highlight here is a little bit about our integrations with vulnerability scanners. So if you encounter a client that is a Tenable shop, that is a Qualys shop, Rapid7, Insight VM, we are, I think, a fantastic solution that works in concert with those. And Kevin, do you mind talking a little bit about the interplay between those?
Absolutely. So I'm using Rapid7 as kind of an example because we literally just set one of these up last week. So what I do is I'm creating a task to interface with the integrated vulnerability scanner. And I can select, we're going to connect to the cloud instance. And with Rapid7, they're going to filter by sites. So let's say I have DMZ, server site, and a workstation site within my Rapid7. I can pick and choose what assets I synchronize with RidgeBot. Once RidgeBot has that asset list, it's going to go through and validate all of the vulnerabilities that Rapid7 Qualys Tenable says that these particular assets have. And then RidgeBot is going to try to exploit anything that it can find as exploitable and then present the findings and also reporting based on that. If RidgeBot finds anything within the 3 that are exploitable, and I think this differs a little bit with Qualys, but for Tenable and Rapid7, it will tag the vulnerability in the vulnerability database, which denotes that that vulnerability is exploitable and has been exploited by RidgeBot. It will also tag the asset in the asset table as with the RidgeBot logo, denoting that that asset is exploitable. So it's a nice kind of give and take. We can keep the security folks working out of RidgeBot or you working out of RidgeBot, and then the VRM team at your client can use whatever vulnerability and risk management solution they're using. And you can keep them in their tool. They can report based on that tag, which should give them a priority list of things to fix yesterday.
Yeah, I think these are really, really powerful integrations and a great way to think about what clients might be a fit for this solution. Also thinking about this with my vCISO hat on or with my business development hat on, where we're looking for new product and service offerings, being able to help prioritize and make sense out of the findings that come out of those vulnerability management tools. We've all read the output from those, hundreds and hundreds of pages and lots of findings that become ultimately very daunting. But if the goal of a vCISO offering is to be able to help contextualize the risk for a business and help point them in the direction of the things that likely lead to the bad thing happening, I think this is a fantastic complementary tool in that regard.
Agreed. Yep, definitely. Let's look at my ransomware pen test real quick, and then I'll turn it back over to Brian. So I can tell that this is still well into it. My attack surface looks pretty small. And RidgeBot's done 614 out of 620 jobs that are focused on ransomware. And of the 2 vulnerabilities, we were able to exploit both of them. So weak password, that makes sense. got the administrator password through SMB. That's always a good one. And then we've got a broken access and authorization through SMB as well. If you'll notice, this particular issue is not even tied to a CVE. So RidgeBot is not a CVE-based, CWE-based vulnerability scanner. We've got well over 150 million detections that reside in this. None of the PII detections are driven by a CVE. They're driven by that threat data that we pull into the tool from third-party resources. That's a good one. I wanted to point that out. And I think that wraps us up on host pin testing and the versions of that with being ransomware or intranet, on how we can look at clients' internal infrastructure and networking gear.
Excellent. Thanks, Kevin. So the third use case that we wanted to highlight for our presentation today is a little bit on our web app and especially our API penetration testing. To my knowledge, RidgeBot is the only solution in the marketplace that does all of the above from a network, web app, and API testing perspective. So in terms of the scope of type of testing that you can perform with RidgeBot, I obviously a little biased, but I think that we're the most comprehensive solution in the market in that regard. And the clients, our early adopters from an API testing perspective, have given us some really fantastic feedback about the benefits of the API testing. I think we've never lived in a more interconnected world in terms of APIs being able to share data between platforms, and facilitate a different level of integration and interconnectivity, but it's also created an ever-increasing attack surface problem for clients. If you think about the number of orphaned APIs out in the world that were left in a development or a sandbox environment, the developer completely forgot about, not with any malice behind it, but just in the course of development work and those kinds of things. So being able to go out and find those APIs and understand the challenges that those present from a security perspective has been, I think, a really huge differentiator, and we've gotten some fantastic feedback from our clients on the benefits of this type of testing. Kevin, do you mind talking a little bit about our website penetration testing and a little bit on our API testing capabilities?
Absolutely. And team, I want to share a story that during a proof of concept with an MSSP, we ran an API scan and found the CEO's credentials being leaked in an unknown API path. So, I mean, just in small engagements like that, we were able to help the partner close that deal and sell them RidgeBot, just on a proof of concept scan. So I will kick off an API scan first. Again, going to give it a good name. I'm going to go grab my Swagger file and pull that in. RidgeBot will validate the Swagger file, validate all my endpoints are valid in there as we look at it. Instead of just saying everything looks okay, I can even look at it if need be. You can see that my Swagger file brought in my target already. I like to put my targets in the task name for some weird reason. I get the user parameters from that particular API, and I'm going to add a couple because I'm going to test this. Thank you, go away. I am going to test this with standard credentials. And I am going to denote this as my admin user because we want to test our websites, our APIs, our hosts, our network gear with and without credentials, because we have to assume that a hacker has compromised somebody's account somewhere and has those credentials and can either A, move laterally, or B, elevate their privileges and move laterally. And let me get that in. So I'm going to go ahead and run this now. I'm going to turn it down to stealthy. I don't really need to do anything else, but I can if I need to. Here is where I can bring in a login sequence. I can record that JSON and that macro of that login and upload it. So there's one way I can gray box test as well as my user parameters. within that. I can also do key value pair of the browser certificate or the session cookie, bring that in. I need to know that if the cookie expires during my test will not complete and I'll need to rerun that. I can also do turn on my guardrails if need be, and should be nothing in post-exploitation. So very quickly, if I've got a good Swagger file, I've got my credentials being standard and admin, and I'm running a pen test on my client's API or APIs. I'll let that cook for a little bit, and I'm going to kick off a web penetration pen test.
And Kevin, while you're doing that, can I ask a little bit about the stealthiness of that? I've noticed on each of these presentations, you've set that stealthy level to low. What would the expected outcome be if you cranked that up? And is there an opportunity to help clients get some testing done on their defensive tools when you turn that level up?
Absolutely. So I typically, if I'm going to be poking around in environments, and I did this with my vulnerability and risk management solutions, I turn the min maxes down. I am a tweaker. I get in and tweak things. I make them more efficient. EDR software is one of the biggest things that's where I kind of learned my lesson that you can't just let something run out of the box for the most part. But once I start removing risk out of the environment, I want to start looking at, is my web application firewall, is it alerting properly? Is my MDR service alerting properly? I used Rapid7's managed detection and response. I never told them when I ran a pen test or were doing any sort of testing. I wanted the alert. I wanted to know that tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars I was spending was going well. So I can do that with this tool. I can kind of romp around in the network loudly and see if I knock over EDR, XDR, if I'm alerting through web application or standard firewalls or intrusion detection or intrusion prevention systems. So very quickly, I can kind of see what's going on in the environment, and then I can start making noise and seeing what actually, if I'm getting the worth out of what I'm paying for.
Yeah, and almost shifting that focus to more of that purple teaming mindset, right? Where you're running an exercise and seeing if you're getting the responses that you're expecting, the alerting that you're expecting, those kinds of elements.
Yep. So I am just testing the Acunetics PHP test website. Again, I can do proxy mode if I've got multi-factor or CAPTCHA involved in my login process. That's basically proxying, like, say, Firefox over to Chrome and letting RidgeBot use that proxy. In our next release, should be this summer, we're going to rework the crawling engine on the back end to where this isn't such a manual process. But if I want to add, again, my login secrets recorder, which I can do for standard. I can do a browser certificate or cookie. I can also do web form autofill and the like if need be. Or again, I can use my dictionaries. And I think I just lost my task. I did. So very quickly, I can get to the bottom of how I need to log in, how the website wants me to log in, which is probably more important because the caveats to the way websites like things tested or logged in is got to be something that you're going to have to kind of fill out with the client. So I'm going to leave everything else alone and go ahead and run this. And that's my web penetration test. So if I go look at one of my previously run API tests, again, red and skull and crossbones is bad. I can jump around to these different menu items, or I can just go across the bottom. So very quickly, I can see that I've got some issues in my API. API broken authentication. So if I look at my task summary, 785 jobs, attack surface of 16 within that this API, found 11 vulnerabilities, and RidgeBot was able to exploit 7 of those in this API. If I look at the attack surface, that's pretty easy to see. I see my method, my label types, and any parameters from my APIs. If I go look at my vulnerability table, I see my risk at the top, but I also see there's a SQL injection contained within my API. RidgeBot wasn't able to exploit it, but I need to take care of that. That's not good. If I look at the risk table, so broken access and authentication, we call out exactly what RidgeBot was able to do and why we're calling this out as an issue. This is the request and the response from the server. I'm getting usernames, UPIs, and passwords in plain text across users. The legitimate request and what the legitimate response should look like. If I look at sensitive API, so I've got a hidden path, which is an API path that was not included in my Swagger file. And RidgeBot was able to get a hold of that. I see usernames and passwords across all of the users in this API file. So that is never good. That's that forgotten API left out there and hanging in midair. We've got a BOLO level attack. We can see where that's coming in as well. So this is a very powerful tool. As Brian alluded to, I don't believe any of our clients are doing this as of today. This one's running still, so we can tell it's still doing discovery. I've got it on stealthy. Let's look at the web pen test that I just ran, or that I've ran. Again, red is bad. I can jump around, but I'll do this on the table. This is a large web server. I can tell by the amount of URLs hanging off of it. I can see any vulnerabilities and then any risk associated that. I've got PII disclosure. Let's see, weak backend password, SQL injection. These are all probably SQL injections. I can look at my attack surface table again. I've got one site, but 50 URLs and their methods and label types. If I look at my vulnerability table, I see a lot of risk. I've got cross-site scripting going on. Even though it's not exploitable, this is a problem. I found a driver's license contained in this website. That's not good. I've got SQL injections. I see database. I've got my user table that's available and exploitable. Credential disclosure through my weak backend password. So very quickly, I get to that risk in my website. If I look at my API reporting, very quickly, I get to the same look and feel. We try to present the common look and feel across the reporting. I get my vulnerabilities and my risk, where my risk lies in adherence to the OWASP top 10. That executive summary, any details or fingerprints, and then there's my broken object level authorization. Here is my evidence. And then here's the kill chain analysis of how RidgeBot was able to do that. And then onto my hidden path. And then the kill chain analysis of how RidgeBot was able to expose that hidden path. And so on and so forth. With the web pen testing, again, familiar look and feel across the reporting, vulnerabilities, exploits, executive overview, risks, summary, and then into the risk. So here's my weak backend password. Again, we obfuscate it on the reports, we disclose it in the tool, and then we show that kill chain analysis of how RidgeBot was able to exploit that. Database manipulation, SQL injection, same thing. And then at the bottom on this particular report, after we get through the vulnerability and remediation, that is on the API. Sorry about that. We're going to show how the API and all of the endpoints adhere to the OWASP top 10 and where that risk lies within that framework and what pillars that you're showing risk in. So very quickly, very easily, I can, on a continuous basis, look at attack surface and compare old scans to new scans to see if my attack surface has grown. Have we been able to shrink that? I can look internally at all of my devices that are IP'd. I can even see any websites, open ports, software installed, things to that nature on my internal infrastructure and pen test against that. I can do specific pen tests with custom scenarios based on types of infrastructure, whether it's Cisco, Palo Alto, what have you. I can look at different applications and databases and authenticate to them while I'm pen testing them with the dictionaries. I can record login sequences, use web form autofill, proxy mode, again, or the dictionaries to authenticate. And for very specific hosts like Windows, I can use Graybox and Windows authenticated pen testing. I can do gray and black box web and API host, ransomware, intranet, and really get a handle on the entire attack surface and where my risk lies across that attack surface. And I'll turn it back over to Brian.
Yeah, Kevin, one of the things I wanted to highlight that you mentioned there that I think is really important and underscores the value of more of a continuous testing mindset is the fact that what's exploitable today isn't necessarily what's exploitable tomorrow. The bad guys are moving quickly. They're figuring out new exploits on a very regular basis. Leveraging AI has made that only easier for them, unfortunately. Can you talk a little bit about how we at RidgeBot update the platform and try to stay in lockstep with what's going on out in the world?
Absolutely. And I'm going to tie that into something you just said because our average days from infiltration to attack has gone from 144, I believe it's nine days from initial um, discovery to attacks being launched. So with RidgeBot, we have, a bi-weekly or every other week sprint cycle for normal updates, plugins, going from 5.1 to 5.2, things to that nature. If we find something or something is reported, we will push that out of band to get it in our clients and your hands so that we can start testing for it. So that being said, RidgeBot does not do automatic updates. This is your tool, your data. We want you to have full control of it, but it's extremely easy. Check for updates, apply updates. This is another thing I wanted to kind of show. This is where you can see licensing information on your deployed RidgeBots at your clients, so you can see where you're at as far as licensing. So the About page, it's a pretty useful page. So again, every other week, typical sprint cadence for updates. Anything that's hit the Kev list or anything that's new like that, we're going to push that out of band.
Excellent. Thanks, Kevin. Great presentation as always. So last couple of minutes, and I want to thank everybody for joining our inaugural MSSP demo day. We're looking forward to making this a recurring series going forward and continuing to share new use cases and new pieces of functionality. We've got some very exciting things on the near horizon that we'll be announcing and building some content around. If you have questions, if you want to learn more, if you want to get a one-on-one demonstration and answer some specific questions or talk with Dennis or I about getting hands-on with the POC, we'd love to chat with you. Here's our contact information and how you can get in contact with us. We will also be at the Channel Partners Show in Las Vegas next week. If any of you happen to be attending, Kevin and I will be there. Would love to chat with you at that particular show. We've got just a couple minutes left. If there's any last minute Q&A, we'd be happy to dive into that. If not, thank you so much for attending. This has really been a fun presentation, and like I said, we look forward to sharing more of these in the future, bringing some of our MSSP and MSP partners into the presentation and letting them showcase their organizations and some of their experiences with the RidgeBot platform as well. So definitely keep an eye on our LinkedIn page for more presentations in the near future. Dennis, anything in the Q&A that you want to highlight?
Yeah, I think one that came to mind is, are we open to tech partnerships? Kevin, maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
Well, we do that. We do that a lot, actually. And there was a API question in there too. We do have a RESTful, a REST API that you can pull data out of RidgeBot. So I wanted to touch on that because I don't think we covered that one. Yeah, we're open to tech partnerships. It just has to make sense to us from where we're going roadmap wise and the tool wise and what we foresee as that being beneficial.
Thanks, Kevin. And then
Sure.
another one, how are we different from Horizon 3?
A couple of things. I'll touch technically on that, and then I'll let you two kind of give your experience. Number one, I believe Horizon 3 is agent-based. Number two, it's a SaaS solution. So Horizon has all of your pen test data in their cloud. The other one is no API testing and no web application testing, if I'm not mistaken. So, and one other thing, no breach and attack simulation. So we're covering 3 different areas that they don't do today, which are important. They have risk, and they need to be looked at.
Thanks, Kevin.
Excellent.
Any other questions from the group while we have 3 minutes left here?
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate you taking the time to join the presentation. Like I said, keep an eye on our LinkedIn page. We'll be announcing some future iterations of this series. And if you're in Las Vegas the next week, keep an eye out for Kevin and I.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone. So we'll be sharing as well the recording on the follow-up email. So keep an eye on that as well. And thank you, Brian, Kevin, and Dennis for today's presentation. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.